Welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending our virtual webinar titled Makerspace Projects for School K-8. Just like how I like to start all of my other webinars, I like to kind of get a gauge on the audience. So what I'm going to do first is we're going to run a poll just to kind of see what grade level you teach. It's going to be just a great way for me to kind of tailor this session for everybody. So you should see this on your screen right now. As you're seeing that poll, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to actually be sharing my screen as well. That way you guys can kind of also see the presentation as it kind of comes up. All right, so we're going to wait about just another minute as people are finishing out that poll, and feel free to write in the chat, write comments, ask questions throughout this whole webinar. I would like it very interactive. So I know we're going to build a lot of different projects, but I want to make sure that if you have any questions about the details, what I did, some different alterations, etc., you can definitely put that in there as well. So in the chat, say where you're from, give free to your welcome sign. So, and then we'll start in a little bit. All right. So we'll, I think we'll stop running the poll now. Let's see what kind of numbers that we have here. All right. So we got a little bit of a mix. That's okay. I like a mix of my audience. So let's get right into our agenda. So the main thing that we're going to start off with talking about is the engineer design cycle. When you get into Makerspace projects, no matter what kind of projects you're doing, it's really important to really think about the engineer design process, or the engineer design cycle, as I refer to it as the EDC. There's a lot of different iterations of this as far as like what word to use, what different steps, how many steps, etc. But it really is about that process, and that's why we got to begin there. Then we're going to get into a bunch of the different Makerspace projects. So I'm going to have plenty of ideas that you can utilize and or modify for your grade level. Like I said, this is a K-8 grade band, so you can certainly modify a lot of these for those projects. I'm then talk a little bit about the materials needed, because a lot of people think, okay, this is the materials I have now, what can I do with that? So I totally understand that. I've been in the classroom before. So when you look at these, make sure to think about, okay, what do I have on hand? What can I utilize? And I'll kind of give some prompts and different ideas as well that you can use for these different projects. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some Q&A, just to allow any kind of different questions at the very end of this. So the engineer design cycle, let's talk about that. So this, I know it as more familiarized with it with a 6-step process. I feel like if you get a little bit longer into that, they think about, okay, what step am I on now? So I think 6 is kind of like a happy medium. On the right-hand side there, you can see, identify, investigate, imagine, plan, create, test, improve, communicate. I have a different iteration of that: ask, imagine, plan, create, improve, and share. But basically, all this is a process for people to be able to solve problems. At the elementary level, what we're trying to get them to understand is that anytime we get a problem, there's this thought process that we should be going through. As adults, we just organically do that, right? We just go from A to B. We just do it with instinct because we've learned through the process. But when you get into the situation for students that are learning something for the first time, it sometimes takes a while. It's just no different when the student takes a phone or their smart device to grandma or grandpa, and they just say, hey, this is how this works. Grandma and grandma are, on the other hand, are learning how to do this, and they'll ask clarifying questions and things that they'll help out. Well, on the reverse side, we have to help those students understand what are some things that we have to think about, what are critical strategies that we can use to help solve those different problems. So that's really what it's coming down to, the engineer design process. And it isn't linear by any means. A lot of people think, oh, just like the scientific method, right? It's a step-by-step process. No. They've kind of altered the scientific method because you might take 2 steps forward and one takes 1 step back. It's about the process of understanding. And this isn't just like, hey, I have to document every little detail of this. And through your process in your mind, after you learn it, then you can just do this normally, right? Without thinking or much thought. You just be able to solve problems better. So it's always good to think about that. And then also understand that This process is usually cross-curricular. So sometimes referred to STEM, STEAM, STREAM, whether you want to integrate this makerspace philosophy with your everyday classroom. There's a lot of ways to be able to integrate this engineer design process. So no different like building a story, right? You have those different story elements. You're going through those same process, but you're using different terminology for that. It's the same idea, it's that process. So when we talk about the foundation, building a successful program at the K-5 level, it's really talking about building the foundation, right? Those fundamental skills that they're going to be needing to learn and understand at the elementary level to really start to set them up for success by the time they get into the middle school and the high school level. At the middle school level, we're getting more into enhancing their skills, right? So we're talking about those real world situations and making some practical solutions for those. At the elementary level, yeah, we'll give them real world problems or scenarios, but maybe they might not come up with like a solution that is going to actually go to an actual product or something that actually can help. Yeah, there's certain circumstances and projects that can do that, but at the middle school level, we're really trying to ramp that up just because we want to talk about that career focus, that applications of how does this relate to the real world? If this is a career that I'm really interested in. So those are the things that we have to be thinking about when we get into these design challenges. All right, so now we're going to get into some shared of different projects. A lot of the projects that I'm going to be showing you are going to actually be tailored from our STEM starter kits that we actually provide. Now, you don't have to use these kits, but these are just kind of like the segue from that. So they're just kind of the kind of like the foundation for where I got a lot of these different ideas. But I'm going to talk about how you can vary these different activities and projects that you can use for your everyday classroom. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the Zipline Racer. So we're going to go to a full screen mode so I can actually show you some of the different projects that I have with me today. The first one is going to be the Zipliner right here. Okay, so as you can see, this little piece right here, you have a plastic piece with a little propeller. On the back, you have a kind of a hook. And in between, you have these 3 popsicle sticks that you're going to be using to be able to fit these together. Now, if you're using these particular plastic pieces, you might have to space out these little popsicle sticks a little bit to be able to get it in there. Otherwise, it's going to be a tight fit. Once you get this piece on here, a lot of people think, okay, well, you know, this might be like my back end, right? Like kind of like a propeller, thinking like a submarine where it kind of propels. Well, this is actually more of like an airplane, right? So we're going to actually get into the front end. So this is the facing front end of your actual device right here. And you want to actually make it go clockwise. So when you're actually going this in clockwise direction, that's what's going to actually start to spin your little rubber band. So once I build on my rubber band piece, I got my device. Now I can actually go clockwise. I can actually spin this to get a little bit of torque on there. And then when I'm ready to go, I let it release. And then you can actually start to build the very basics of this Zipliner. Once you actually start to build the other materials, now you can actually start to say, okay, what am I going to actually put on that piece of string? Is it going to be a straw? Is it going to be a paper clip? What am I going to be able to utilize to be able to drive my force that's going to be able to propel this down the line? Now, one thing that I noticed, or what I did here, is I changed a couple different factors. So the first factor is the height, right? How close are you going to get to the string? So this one, obviously the full distance of the popsicle stick. This one I cut and I measured it so that it wouldn't actually hit with the propeller right here. That's one thing you've got to watch out for, is the string is coming through here. This is where it's going. So if you make it too short, the propeller is actually going to hit the string. So that's something like a tip or something to think about with the students as they're building their projects. But you can definitely test the height. So notice that I decreased it as about as short as I could make it based on what I have. So that's one variable that I can actually test to see, does that actually improve my design? Another thing that you can use to improve your design is how many turns. So when you're looking at this head on, one full turn is actually one propeller going all the way back up here. So that's one full turn. Then we can get into 2 full turns. Then we get into 3. Then we get into 4. And you so on and so forth. And you can actually test, okay, how does this actually factor or actually change the distance that I have for my design? If again, I'm changing only one variable at a time. So I've done 10 turns, I've done 20, I've done 30. And you can see, well, how many turns can I get without actually, before it starts to affect the actual strain between this band right there. Another variable that you can test also is changing the different design that you have on the actual very top. So instead of using a straw, maybe you'll use some sewing bobbins right here. So it's a little clear. It's like those little string that you use for yarn. Maybe at the top here, you use like paper clips, or you use sewing bobbins onto that string. So as you attach it, instead of using a straw where there might be some friction there, maybe you're getting less friction with a bobbin or a paper clip or something else. So a lot of different variables that you could test, you can use. What I really like about this project is now that you've kind of created your Zipline Racer, you've raced it before, you can actually use the same propeller now to make more or less an airplane. So I can actually use this design before I've, so what's the same propeller, the same different materials you use to make your Zipline Racer. Now you can actually fly this. Now I'm going to actually get this to go a little bit that way. That's fine here. And I'm just going to fly it off to the distance. So again, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of different variations that you can do with these projects. This just happens to be the one project that I like. Now we're going to go back to sharing our full screen again, back to my presentation, because I wanted to also go into what are some other different supplies that you can utilize. So within this kit, you get, of course, your string. There's two 12-foot strings that you utilize to be able to send the racer down. You have your propellers, your hooks, rubber bands, and craft sticks to help build that base. Other supplies you can use, Chanel stems, there's, the sewing bobbins. You can add weight to these elements. So when you're not only you've got these devices, you can actually use like some kind of dough or washers to see, hey, does the weight actually affect how fast or how far this can actually go? You can, of course, use different adhesives, tape. I happened to use this Aleena's Fast Grab Tacky Glue. That happened to work a little bit better than your traditional Elmer's glue. Elmer's glue is probably not going to be strong enough if you're going to try to glue like the straws to the popsicle sticks. So think about that when you're adhesive, when you're using this project. And again, different craft sticks as well. Some different extension ideas that you can use with this. Building a tournament. So you know how March Madness is like this big thing. Well, you could make like this March Madness feel right in your classroom, kind of make it a competition, right? After everybody has their core materials, they build their designs, they've tested it out. Now we're going to actually build this tournament, see who can go the longest or who can go the farthest. And you can make it almost school wide, like, hey, this classroom, the best of the best is going to go up against the best of the best in a different classroom and see all those different designs, right? So there's a lot of different iterations you can do there. You can use two propellers. So oftentimes that you use the one propeller, now you can use side-by-side propellers and see if you can create a mechanism that can actually make it go farther or longer or faster. How does that affect the overall performance of your Zipline Racer? You can, of course, collect data, right? You can check the time, the weight, the speed, and be able to utilize it and start to graph it. So at the early stages, maybe they're just designing this, right? They're keeping track in their journals, that engineer design process. They actually build it. They actually get to see if it works. At the higher end, at the middle school level, now we're going to actually use some math and science behind it, right? Collect some data. How fast did it go the first time? Now that I made my iterations, how fast did it go this time based on my time? So you can do some different trials and actually make it a lot better. Then, of course, you can use air instead of the propeller. So using balloon force, did that change it? Did that make it better? How am I going to hold the balloon onto my device? That's going to be a challenge in itself. Then you can also get into the test, which racer can hold the most weight, right? So this design, maybe you have to have a certain design that everybody has a core design, but then there's little variations at the top you can change and modify, and then see what can hold the most weight and still go 12 feet or however many feet you need to go. So a lot of fun projects, a lot of great things with the Zipline Racer. The next project is going to be the egg drop challenge. So again, we're going to go to the big screen face right there. So this project right here, we're going to get into a little bit of some of the different designs here that you can utilize. What I really liked about this project is that, everybody's heard of it before, the egg drop, right? But a lot of people think, okay, I know the egg drop, but does it really teach math? Does it really teach science? How is this actually applicable to real day life, right? It's just a design challenge. I don't like it, right? Well, what they don't realize is the egg drop, what it really tailors to is the actual airdrop. If you think about supplies in third world countries or for military strategic reasons, planes, everything, there's something called a low velocity drop and then a high velocity drop. A low velocity drop is something that they want to touch the ground with the minimal amount of force. In this case, just like an egg drop. Right? You have your egg, you have a device that holds your egg, and then you want it to be able to slowly touch the ground because you don't want it to break. So just in everyday life that they use from these planes, they do cargo and other different supplies, and they want this low velocity, just like somebody like if just want, parachuting, or, air skydiving, they want minimal amount of force that actually comes to the ground. There's also high velocity airdrops. And what those are is basically they use a different mechanism. So think of like a tank, right? You ever seen those airplanes that kind of fly really close to the ground? All of a sudden they drop something onto the ground. Well, they have a different mechanism where they have a parachute that drops out to the side and then it slowly drops it to the ground. It can still be fast because they're still going fast, but it's a different design for that. So in this case, we're creating a low velocity, but there's also low and high velocity. So it's good to kind of teach you how is this applicable to their everyday life. And that's where this egg drop design challenge comes into play. So now when we have our egg, we have our design. So if we want to look up close and really look at this, there's kind of like these two foam pieces that kind of hold this in place. Now I've used these plastic, different kind of like poles, if you will, that structures that kind of go through these holes in the actual design of the styrofoam. Now, if these actually come with a kit, the styrofoam and these actual plastic pieces, but I've also found that you can use, craft sticks or popsicle sticks to also use that in case you don't have these poles. Or maybe you want to create this idea and then use cardboard instead or something else that could be able to hold this as well. So that's just kind of some different iterations you can use. You can use rubber bands to be able to hold this as well. And then you also can use other different devices, right? So now you can use, those, from toilet paper, empty toilet paper rolls, other different designs that kind of be from bumpers. You can use straws to be able to connect here that create bumpers on the top and the sides. And then you can also start to create, parachutes and other different designs too, as well, if you want to kind of reiterate that as well. So a lot of different factors to create this low velocity drop. There's a lot of cool different designs. You can make it small, you can make it elaborate. And there's a lot of ways that you can actually modify this as well. So when you're building a scenario with an egg drop, that's kind of helps it kind of in case, okay, why am I building this egg drop? But then you can alter it based on the different supplies you have, recyclable goods, things that you come with the kit and what's included, or you can vary that. So I'm going to jump back into my presentation again, just to kind of make sure to show what else that I have. So other supplies that you can use with packaging, like if you go online shopping and you get at home. So I know like if you get like these air pieces here that you can have packaging, a lot of variety of different things that you can use that. Parachutes, of course, garbage bags, fabric. If you're making a foot by foot square, or do you make it like more of like a different shape and design, like a hexagon? What works better? What doesn't work better? Toilet paper rolls, of course, your adhesive straws, rubber bands, just a lot of great projects that you can do with this. Again, you can build a competition with this. You can have multiple groups where they're using 2 eggs and multiple designs. So maybe that you have this competition where you have to create at least 3 different designs and each drop has to go, 10 feet. And then you have to make it successful. Great. Now, based on that, maybe you pick your best design and then you're going to do more of like a height challenge or something else. But you can collect data, you can do some graphs, see if there's any kind of correlation using a standard amount of weight. Maybe your design has to be at least 1 pound, right? And that's including the egg. If you're going to be practicing this with younger children, maybe you want to use plastic eggs at first, because plastic eggs obviously are not going to crack, they're not going to break. And so you get to practice with that. And then you can put little weights inside of them to simulate how heavy an egg would be. So it kind of gets that feel for it, but then there's a little bit more practice. So you're not breaking tons and tons of eggs. And then of course, increasing the height, that also is a nice design. So there's just a lot of great ways and great projects that you can do with just the egg drop challenge, but that's just another project that you could be doing. Oh, and I forgot the last one, promoting a product advertisement. So remember when I was talking about this is kind of simulating like a low velocity airdrop. Well, what you can do is saying, hey, I've created this new prototype or product that can help with, low or fast velocity airdrops, and you can start advertising it. So at the middle school level, maybe you get some promotioning. How would you market this to the, with keeping track of a budget and understanding how much of this supplies actually cost, things of that scenario. So you can actually treat this like it's an actual product that can be used in everyday life. And that's just another way that you can extend this different project. All right. The next thing we're going to be getting into is, of course, the balloon cars. We're going to go back to the full screen mode to be able to see all the different projects. And so this one is very, very atypical. A lot of people have done, the balloon challenges. So this actually comes in a different package that you can have different supplies. Again, various different materials. One of the things that I kind of like is it actually has the foam wheels that are already designed. Sometimes wheels can be an issue when you're building cars. If you're using a balloon, it already has a plastic mechanism here that you can utilize. I will do an up close version of this just to kind of see it a little bit better. So it's just an easy way that you can utilize it. This obviously being the side that you want to breathe in through your balloon. And so when you're getting this design challenge, a lot of people think, oh, the balloon's in the back, right? That propels. Well, the mistake is that you want to make sure it's on actually propelling towards the front. So when you're blowing this, it's going to blow air out the back and it's going to propel it forward. Okay, so we're going to go back to the full screen. Again, I created something called the X factor. It could be the X factor, whatever you want to design. A lot of different variables you can test on this really, as far as like the axles, on the friction. Now I used a straw and then I used the plastic component in there to be able to allow a little bit less friction there. If I just tape the black rod that's attached to the wheels right to the actual base of the car, how is that going to actually affect the design? Is that actually going to go somewhere? Is it not going to go somewhere? Another thing is the actual base itself. Now this happens to be cardboard. You can use anything, an egg carton. You can use an actual, 20-ounce bottle if you wanted to, just depending on what you want to use and design. Another variation of this is, hey, do you need this plastic piece? Maybe you can use this 20-ounce bottle or 2-liter bottle, however big you want. You attach it here. And then, okay, now it doesn't have exit air anywhere, so it doesn't go anywhere. So if you actually use the hole in the back and kind of used more of like a forced air approach to kind of consolidate where the air is going, does that affect your design? Does that make it faster? Does that make it, doesn't go as far, et cetera? So there's a lot of different things that you can test with this, different variables, a lot of different supplies. You could use these caps for wheels if you wanted to. CDs are very common, rubber bands. Then you can test the different weights of this as well. So a lot of different things, car drum, maybe you want to test, it has to go a certain distance based on like the time that is going. So just kind of setting up those real world scenarios with this design challenge. So I'm going to switch back again to my share screen, to my presentation that you're going to be able to utilize. But you can use all kinds of materials. And like I said, it can vary. You can use aluminum foil. You can use all kinds of different materials. I'm not going to get into the details. You kind of get the idea. Again, competitions, tournaments, you can test the perfect design. So say, for example, that it has to have a certain amount of weight. It can only be however long. And, maybe after testing all these different factors, whether the weight, the axles, everything else, can you create, after testing all those out, can you create like the perfect design and then have those kind of challenges? So it's almost kind of like a do-over. Otherwise, you could test, which can go the straightest, what can go the fastest, what can go the longest. Maybe you have 3 different categories and each group gets to decide which category they want to test it out in. And of course, the classic do-over. I created my design. After going through my design, I made some iterations. I've kind of made improvements. Maybe if I had a do-over, maybe I would do it this way instead. So maybe you want to do a do-over. And you could use these kind of same applications for all the different projects, right? It could be for the balloon challenge, the egg drop. Maybe it can be for the Zipline Racer. All these different things that you can utilize for that. All right, now we're going to get into more of like the tips and tricks. So a lot of these challenges should be open-ended. You want students to be resourceful for using recyclable goods. Yes, you can use these kits. We actually sell them and you can buy them, but we want you to extend past what the just basic core is, right? We want you to be innovative in design. So if I give you 4 wheels, a straw, 4 plastic pieces, a balloon, and the plastic balloon apparatus to be able to blow air in it, from that design, I want you to create the fastest car, right? So that's your first design. It has to go at least, 10 feet and it has to be the fastest. So if your car design goes straight, it's going to go a lot faster than a car that veers right or left. So you want to make sure to have some kind of factors in that, but those are the things that they're going to be able to test out. So they want to be resourceful. They also should relate to real world applications, just like the egg drop, the Zipline Racer. Well, you ever been on a zip line before, like on a ride that you constantly go on? They use it for rock climbing and all kinds of other different factors. So when you think about weights and you think about distance, how does that actually play a factor in that? So think of those real world applications when you're ever designing projects for a makerspace. It has to have that real world application, the understanding of why. Why am I doing this? What does it relate to real world? You can see the science, you can see the math, depending on the center of the gravity in your design, especially when it comes to Zipline Racer, or even with your balloon car. How does that have a factor in that? If you have to maybe go around a course and do a turn, etc. So those are all things that you can think about. And then you can also want some sort of assessment piece, right? As we all know, we want to see where do students start, where did they grow, and what did they learn, and how we use that is through the assessment, whether it's informal, formal, summative, or cumulative. So all journals and rubrics are typical for this. I like to use sometimes self-evaluations. Oftentimes students might be like, hey, you know what? I think I did the best, my very best on this. Or, some students, they'll say, you know what? I didn't do my very best design. I didn't think I put as much effort in this, but it might be the best project in the class. It's those different things that make you think about, okay, if this student would have spent even more time, how much better, even better would their design be, right? So those self-evaluations sometimes help through some of this process as well. I just gave an example of a rubric there. I just wanted you to see one example. You can use this presentation if you want to. This is being recorded. So if you see this, you want an example of that, I could send that to you as well. And then I also wanted to talk about the actual STEM starter kits themselves. So each kit is actually $30. They're enough to build actually 6 projects at a time. There's the 3 that I focused on: the balloon, the car, the egg drop, and the Zipline Racer. There is additional supplies that can and should be used with this. When they actually have this, when they actually design these kits, they actually purposely don't have step-by-step instructions. And the reason being is because we want them to really critically think. We want them to have the risk of actual failure, because we all know that we learn through our failures. So it's really trying to get students to kind of go through that process, document, really planning strategically in their journals. Okay, this is the design I'm thinking of. This is where the propeller is going to go. This is where the weight's going to go. This is where the straws and all the popsicle sticks and other materials I'm going to be using before they even start building their design. So they have this idea, and as they're building this design, they can reiterate saying, okay, wait a minute, I thought this is where this could go. I thought this is the distance or how long the popsicle sticks is, but I noticed all of a sudden now that it's going to actually hit the straw, the propeller is going to hit the straw and the string. So I actually have to increase the height of the distance there. So all those different applications are going to be in factor. And these kits just do a really good job of having just the base supplies that you need to be able to go beyond that. $30 is a great reasonable price point. It gets you right in the starter direction. But as you can see, you can modify any of these different projects for your own needs as well. So that's the end of the presentation. I just want to reiterate who I am. My name is Jordan Nelson. I'm the Customer Engagement Manager with Nasco. I present a lot of professional development webinars. I do a lot of different hands-on projects. And I love sharing different ideas. Feel free in the chat to share some of your own ideas if you would like to. You can also reach out to us at that email right there, engage@nascoeducation.com. If you have any questions from that webinar, feel free to reach out to us at this time. And again, you can write any of the different questions. I have my laptop here to see just the different questions that you might have through chat. Feel free to answer them at that time. I'm gonna wait a couple minutes for you to be able to answer some of those or ask those questions. And these are just some different projects that you have here. I have a lot more different ideas. So if you're watching this and you want me to present some more, reach out to me as well. I can definitely share some other different projects and things that you can use through K-8. Maybe if you want to get into the high school level, I'm more than willing to do that as well. So I'm looking at our current chat right now. I don't see any questions, and that's okay. Like I said, you have my contact information. I appreciate you for joining me for this webinar. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for coming in and joining me.